Two, one.
All right, what's up, everybody? My name is Dante yet again. I'm back with another video. Do I sound like a YouTuber? Anyway, so I'm gonna be talking to y'all about this week's readings, which was a rough reading, but Lilica did provide us with the video that kind of broke it down a little bit, and I think that was actually really helpful. But I did do the reading, and watching the video and doing the readings is very helpful. So with that being said, I have came up with like this argument where I want to base my this whole video about. And it is that the zombie apocalypse embodies the paradoxical liminality of our existence within a society. Therefore, the zombie apocalypse is both a modern and postmodern analytical tool for either our oppression or our liberation. All right. And before I go into like my whole argument of what I'm trying to argue in that, I just want to just like contextualize some things first. I feel like I have to just set some groundwork for my argument. And first, it's this idea of the Marxist dialectic. And how I understand it is that you have the thesis, the antithesis, and then you have the synthesis, right? The thesis is like the current paradigm, like our current society, like our status quo right now. And then you have the antithesis, which is like the catalyst for change, or as I'm calling it for the sake of this video, the liminal realm. All right. And then you have the synthesis, which is the new paradigm, or like the product of the antithesis and the thesis. Okay. And what I really want to focus on. So now that we have that, that's just very important to kind of just understand that. But now that we have that, I want to talk about what Bell Hooks talks about in her book, Teaching to Transgress. It's this idea of the liminal space, right? And the liminal space, how she describes it, is one of the most paramount stages of development. And the reason why it's one of the paramount stages of development is because it is where we really take stock of if we regress or transgress. And through this whole video, I'm gonna be talking about transgress, and I just love it. It's my new word. It's the word of the month. Anyway, yeah. So that's how I'm gonna really, and I really want to focus on the antithesis, which I'm calling the liminal realm, because that is the point that the zombie apocalypse exists in. Is in that antithesis, that catalyst for change, that liminal space, that liminal realm. All right. So enough of the liminal realm. We're going into why I feel like the zombie apocalypse is an analogy for our modern day oppression, right? If we think about like any zombie movie or any zombie TV show, they pretty much recreate society with like a twist or like a sense of novelty. But nothing really changes, right? And if you think of like, let's say like the $10 bill, for example, the $10 bill, it had many iterations throughout its existence, right? It looked different in the 1990s, it looked different in 2000s, and it looks different now. But it's still the same $10 bill, essentially, right? And I think of that like in a sense of like the zombie apocalypse. You see in the zombie apocalypse movie, you have a society where it's people who have the most guns who are in charge. The people who have the most resources are in charge. The people who are white are in charge, right? And if we look at like our modern day society, it's kind of like a analogy for modern day society, because if you think about it, the people with the strongest military controls societies in the world, right? The people with the most resources, and that can be like money or like food or whatever type of resources is valuable to people. Or you could think of white supremacy as being a system of control that has a stranglehold on society currently. You know what I mean? So like when we think of zombie apocalypse, those types of things just reinforce our modern day oppression. And that's what that liminality is, right? When we experience the zombie apocalypse, we regress back to what the modern, like the modern forms and systems of oppression, right? And it doesn't necessarily transgress, it regresses. All right. Now going into like how the zombie apocalypse can be a catalyst for liberation. This is a little tricky because there isn't really any movies that I can think of that has like a liberatory. And now that I'm saying that liberatory, like, is that a word? I don't know. Words get created every day. This is the day liberatory might get created. Anyway, I don't really know if there's any like liberatory like show or movie or book of a zombie apocalypse that transgresses the bounds of society or humanity. I can think of one example. It's not really a true example of transgressing like society or anything, but it's this movie with Nick Cannon. It was a zombie movie. I forget the name of it, but it was a zombie movie. He was a soldier, and one of his like other soldier people, they were bitten. They turned to a zombie, and then they didn't even eat people because they were a vegetarian before they became a zombie, which is interesting because I've never seen that before. So it kind of like just subverted my expectations, but it didn't really transgress zombies, the zombie apocalypse as a whole. Anyway, that's just a little thing that I was thinking about. But this idea that Bell Hooks talks about in her book, no, this idea of transgression that Bell Hooks talks about in her book, Teaching to Transgress, when she says that that space of liminality is where change happens, I think of like 2020. And I know 2020 wasn't a zombie apocalypse, but it was like, I feel like apocalypse adjacent. Because of the fact that like shit was shut down. You know what I mean? People weren't working, people were getting sick, people still are getting sick, and people are still dying. But it was like in America right now, stuff is starting to open back up, right? So in that moment of liminality, in that moment of the apocalypse, we saw how shitty our education system was. We saw how shitty our bosses are. We saw how shitty corporations are. We saw how shitty landlords are. Fucking landlords. We saw how shitty all that stuff was, and we could have used that moment of liminal catalyst of change to transgress. And you know, we talked about all about like, oh, we're going back to the new normal, or we're going back to the norm, or we're going to embrace the new normal. I feel like we didn't embrace the new normal. We only regressed back to what we knew. We regressed back to the old paradigm and then transitioned to a new paradigm. So the zombie apocalypse could be that, right? Like we could do better as far as like educating like people or relieving debt for people with loans, education loans. We could do better with getting people better time off or better pay. We could do better and not go off to space for whatever the fuck reason, Jeff Bezos, and while your people are pissing in Gatorade bottles. We could do better on that, but we don't. Okay? And those are the moments that we could have learned from to transgress. We didn't, but whatever. So that's how we can liberate ourselves, is by transgressing instead of regressing. Now, I'm going to end it. And it was a question that was posed by the authors. Actually, it was posed by this dude named Franco Morchetti. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. It went along the lines of, will the end be monstrous or will it be liberating? And I thought about that, and I think it will actually be both. If you think of it in the terms of our modern oppressive state, like the modernity and how it's oppressive right now, it could be monstrous for the masses, right? Because those who oppress, the systems that oppress us, like the military-industrial complex, capitalism, and white supremacy, and the whole slew of things, will just continue to have a broader grip on society. It could be liberating in the sense in postmodern era by having the masses be liberated from the military industrial complex, liberated from capitalism and hierarchy, and liberated from white supremacy. But it could be monstrous for the people or the systems that thrive off of our oppression. So I actually think it's both. But we won't really know, like the author said, like we won't really know what a true postmodern, post-human, post-structural world will look like, because it will be a totally new paradigm. And I totally agree with that. So that's it. I think I'm gonna give a shout out to my boyfriend. He back there. I'm gonna get a shout out to Bell Hooks, because she taught me transgress, and I love that word now. I'm gonna give a shout out to my dog Scooby. Anyway, he sleep. All right. Thank you.